Super happy you guys are joining us. We are going to talk about a new technological breakthrough in GI testing, the brain and GI connection. I'm Dr. Dan Kalish. I'm going to talk to you today about, um, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to go all crazy on you all, but one of the most exciting things that's probably happened in the last 15, 20 years, in my mind, in functional medicine. So, if you go back and you look at the history of functional medicine and what we're all doing here and why all these doctors are even bothering to do this, and you look back at naturopathic medicine, you go back a couple of hundred years, go back a couple of thousand years, you'll see, and it always comes back to the gut and what's happening in the digestive tract. And, the only thing that's probably maybe in some ways has superseded the importance of the gut in terms of human health is, toxicity-related issues, which we'll save for another day. But you do have arguments sometimes at these really high-level functional medicine conferences between the doctors over it's more important that our patients are toxic, it's more important that the gut is an issue. But for most of natural health history, the gut's been the dominant problem because toxins are a relatively new issue. And so when you get well down to what's going on with the gut, and this is the center of our overall health, and everything that we do health-wise revolves around our gut function. There's only, at some fundamental level, like 2 or 3 things that can mess your gut up. And primarily it comes down to either emotional stress and spiritual disconnection. We're not going to talk about that today, so let's forget about that for a minute. Let's pretend like we're all emotionally healthy and spiritually enlightened. Then it would come down to either food reactions or pathogens. And we can control the food reactions really easily by what we eat. The pathogens are really the hardest part of functional medicine historically. What are the pathogens that a patient has? How are you going to find them? And once you find them, they're pretty straightforward to kill. But diagnosing the pathogens can be really, really just ridiculously challenging, right? And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about some of the testing technologies that have broken through and that are new and that are pretty darn exciting. Also, you might see that I have a camera here. You can make the camera bigger or smaller. There'll be moments when the camera will take over. I also have a new innovation. Well, it's not new to human history or to human beings, but it's new to me, which is that we now have a blackboard I can use too. I'll show you how this is. We have a second camera set up now. So I can run over here, hi again, and I can write on the blackboard, for answering questions and doing little drawing things. So. And you can, there'll be moments when the camera is big or small, and you can minimize it most of the time. It's under your control based on your computer. Okay. So let's take a look at what we're talking about. And also we're going to get into the whole brain-GI connection, hormone GI connection, how the GI is connected to everything. And the brain is one of the more important aspects of all this. There's me, Dr. Dan. I've been in practice for a long time. Getting to that age where you start to downplay the number of years you've been doing things rather than exaggerate. But around 24 years, maybe 25, worked with a lot of patients all over the world. We trained hundreds and hundreds of doctors, over 1,000 now, I think, in the Kalish method. It's becoming a tool that a lot of people are becoming aware of, which is really wonderful. We had some big breakthrough things that happened a couple months back. Earlier this year, we published a study on the evaluation of a functional medicine approach to treating fatigue, stress, and digestive issues in women. And that was with Sue Cutshall at the Division of General Internal Medicine at Mayo Clinic in Rochester. Larry Bergstrom was at the Division of Consultative Medicine at Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, and Dan Kalish, who's right here, talking to you. And so what we found in this, one of the things that came out of the study, which is really interesting, is that and we looked at 20 to 25. We started off with 25 women, ended up, I think, with 21. And we ran HPA axis and gut testing on them. We found in the initial group of testing, there were 19 infections total in the group of 21 women, or 25 women. And on the retesting, we were able to clear all but one of the infections. So this natural health stuff really works. And what's even more important, probably, than the fact that this works is that it's a really common problem. Out of the people that participating in the study, we found 19 infections. Some people had more than one. So there are some people that were infection-free, but a lot of people have chronic GI infections, and that's the whole point of tonight's talk. Sorry, is my sound a little messed up? Is that better? Marjorie, let me know if that's better or not. I've got this very expensive mic, but sometimes it doesn't work unless I position it just right. Hopefully, I mean, complain about the sound if you all can't hear me. Just send a little note there, okay, and I'll try to clear it up. So the basic idea is that, and this is the hardest concept within functional medicine, I'd say the hardest concept for all of us health-wise, is to realize that most digestive tract infections are not accompanied by digestive tract symptoms. Okay, I'm going to say that again, and I'm going to repeat this every minute or two for the next hour. The vast majority of digestive tract infections that we find and correct with functional medicine are not resulting in digestive tract symptoms. Okay? Super important. I'm going to say it one more time because this is so important. This is the hardest concept to get. You could have an H. pylori infection that has destroyed your stomach lining and a Giardia infection that's taken out your small intestine and have no digestive tract symptoms. So amongst these women that we looked at in the research study, not all of them had digestive tract symptoms. In fact, the majority of them didn't. And what got better when we cleared their digestive tract problems? Their fatigue was better. Their energy levels were better. They felt less stressed. They were able to be more active. Of course, digestive symptoms will also clear up. But the main point of functional medicine is that it's not symptomatic-oriented treatment. Okay? We're not looking at symptoms and then treating symptoms. We're looking at the overall problems that go on. And one of the biggest problems, if not the biggest problem, is going to be chronic digestive tract inflammation due to two things: either eating the wrong foods or having multiple digestive tract infections. Every bite of food that you take is either going to trigger inflammation in your body or relieve inflammation in your body. So we can control inflammation in our bodies with food, and most of us eat foods that are pro-inflammatory all the time. All the good stuff is pro-inflammatory. Ice cream, cakes, cookies, even a lot of breads, pro-inflammatory. Okay? The anti-inflammatory foods, obviously, vegetables primarily, and fruit to a certain extent as well. So diet is really relatively straightforward, and you can figure out what's an anti-inflammatory diet really easily. The buzzwords now are different than they were, 30 years ago, but a whole foods, plant-based diet. Do you have to eat like that every day? No, but in general, a whole foods, plant-based diet is going to be anti-inflammatory. Do you have to eat zero meat? No, you can have some animal products, but the bulk of your food should be coming from a whole foods, plant-based diet that's anti-inflammatory. And then if you got that sorted out, then we want to look at, what possible digestive tract infections you have and what body system is it impacting? Is it impacting your brain? Is it impacting your liver? What's happening? Okay. So the new testing that's now available goes back, and I'll just give you a little bit of the history in terms of all this. So the history on this is kind of fascinating. So I don't know, 12 years ago, somewhere around there, one of the lab companies that no longer exists, it's a company called Metametrics, they were bought by another larger company, and it created this test that's using what's called PCR, or it's a DNA test. And just like if you had a movie you're watching on TV and there was a crime, someone gets killed in the bathroom, and then the police come and they find that there's a hair in the bathtub, and they run a DNA sample on that hair, and they can prove that, who the criminal was because they found the hair in the bathtub right next to the dead person. Yeah? So the DNA tests, widely accepted by our culture as being quite accurate. For crime technology, you can use that exact same type of technology and apply it to looking for parasites, bacteria, and yeast. So they have DNA as well, and you can test for the DNA with this sophisticated technology. So it's been around for a very long time, the PCR DNA type technology. Applying it to GI infections has been something that's been done for a decade and a half. But what hasn't happened until now is that in the past, when the original lab companies that were doing this built the DNA PCR tests, they were homebrew tests. It was an internal test that the lab developed itself within its own company. And so eventually that test sort of morphed and was basically taken off the market for the most part. And it wasn't that accurate. It was okay, but not great. And all the doctors that were ordering that original round of DNA testing for parasites, bacteria, and yeast, this was a little frustrating. A lot of people gave up on it. I didn't. I kept at it. But it was never great. And a company was developed recently. The test is called the GI map test. And it uses, instead of a proprietary internally developed technology, they're using a technology for PCR DNA testing that's widely accepted by research institutions and hospitals throughout the world. So it's what they call third-party validated, which means like they didn't make this up in a lab. It's something that's accepted by the scientific community in general, and they're using reference ranges that are also accepted. So we finally have a culturally accepted, scientifically accepted PCR test for infections. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction, PCR. All right? Let's see if my sound is, I don't know why I'm having sound problems, but hopefully that's a little better. We can get into a little more on the detail in that in a minute. Now, within functional medicine, again, there can be, emotional, GI, or toxin-related reasons why people get sick. Those are the three big categories. And then when people start to get sick because of chronic GI problem, that GI problem can be an underlying cause. It will cause predictable types of physiological damage. I want to focus on this today. Eventually, it can start to generate symptoms. So, let's take one infection, H. pylori. It's a bacterial infection of the stomach. I've treated over 500 patients with it, well over 500. In the training program where I trained doctors, we probably looked at a couple thousand H. pylori infections over all these years of the doctors testing. It's really something we treat all the time in functional medicine. Now, an H. pylori infection theoretically should be causing an ulcer, bleeding in your stomach pain, or some kind of stomach symptom. But we have patients who only have weight gain because of that stomach infection. There's hundreds of patients I can think of whose only problem H. pylori caused was fatigue. There's a couple dozen I can think of whose problem was depression. The H. pylori was causing inflammation in the stomach that was inflaming the brain, dropping the neurotransmitter levels down, and was creating depression. In other words, H. pylori, as a single example, can cause non-GI related symptoms. In fact, most of the time, these GI infections will cause symptoms that aren't GI related. And that's where it gets really, really, really confusing. Now, you could have pain in the shoulders. You could have insomnia. I've had several patients with insomnia because of H. pylori. You could have skin problems. You could definitely have an autoimmune issue triggered by an infection coming from the gut. So the symptoms and the underlying cause, completely different columns. But one thing I want to talk a lot about today is sort of this intermediary step here that I call physiological damage. So we have an underlying cause. Let's say it's a GI infection, like H. pylori. That's going to cause some physiological damage. There's predictable damage that's going to occur. And to keep it simple, I've had it broken down to 4 categories. There's inflammation, catabolic physiology, insulin resistance, and oxidative stress. And we'll talk about each one of these individually in a moment. Once these physiological damage scenarios start up for long enough, then eventually the body system starts to fail. But remember, it might not be the GI system. It might be a neuroendocrine problem, a hormone or a gut problem causing a hormone problem. And then eventually symptoms occur. Person's overweight, tired, depressed, whatever it may be. So the complicated thing about the human body is that these things usually don't together in time. So you can pick up a GI infection 15 years ago, have inflammation and insulin resistance going on, but not notice it so much, end up with a hormone-related problem that's causing weight gain, fatigue, and depression. And again, there's a 15-year gap between these processes, right? So when a patient comes in and they have weight gain, fatigue, and depression, they're not associating that back 15 years ago to when they picked up the GI infection. And in my practice, on average, when we do find digestive tract infections, and when we do figure out how long they've been there, it's usually around 10, 12 years. maybe as long as 15 years, that people have had these infections before they caused enough symptoms to really trigger a major problem. Now, I know that sounds a little abstract, but it's really how the body works. So here they are, the 4 horsemen of physiological damage. We're going to take a couple of breaks throughout this class too, because it's kind of heavy-duty material. Okay? We're going to take a fun break, and then we're going to take a commercial break. Inflammation. That means you're inflamed. You whack your thumb with the hammer, it gets inflamed. Inflammation is bad. Everyone kind of knows that. Catabolic physiology. That means you're breaking things down. Catabolic is the opposite of anabolic. Insulin resistance. That means your blood sugar's unstable and your body's not handling insulin properly. That's a really bad thing to have happen. And then oxidative stress puts you well, all 4 of these things, especially oxidative stress, but all 4 of these things put us at risk for cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. Those are the 3 major illnesses of our times. Cardiovascular disease would be heart attack, stroke, stuff like that. Cancer and diabetes are all directly related to inflammation, metabolic physiology, insulin resistance, and very especially oxidative stress. So when we have a GI infection that's making us inflamed with a lot of oxidative stress, that's increasing our potential risk factors for problems like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. And this is why the diet is so important, because you can eat an anti-inflammatory diet that's full of antioxidants and help reduce inflammation and oxidative stress and protect yourself against cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. And there's so much research out there that talks about how effective diet can be in terms of even controlling and reversing problems like heart disease. But it all comes back to the gut. If your gut is inflamed and you have a lot of digestive tract infections, you're not going to benefit fully from the dietary changes that you make. We see this in practice all the time. So remember, physiological damage is occurring in our example tonight from some kind of digestive tract infection. So what tissues actually get damaged? And then what happens when they get damaged? Well, if your mitochondria get damaged, you're going to be tired. If your adrenal hormone production is compromised, you might have a sleep problem. If your neurotransmitter system is damaged from the gut infection, you might get depressed. If your DNA replication is damaged, you get what they call DNA adducts, you're at high risk for cancer. If your gut lining gets damaged, you might have food allergies. If your liver gets damaged, you might have all kinds of toxicity-related symptoms like allergies. Okay? And so this goes on and on, right? The problem is that the gut inflammation problem is almost universal in patients that we work with, but the way that it expresses, what tissues that are damaged vary. And that's why most doctors and most patients don't see the level of dysfunction coming from the gut, because we're conditioned to believe that if there's a problem, there should be a symptom, and it's really just not. It's just not that simple. It's really not how the body works. Why is it more complex than that? Okay? So you can have anything from damaged mitochondria to damaged DNA because of a gut infection. And what's the mediator that's kind of acting between this is the physiological damage that's occurring. Now, the question then becomes, where's the damage coming from? And that's what we try to investigate with these various functional medicine tests. And then when we're designing programs, again, you're thinking about what's the underlying cause and how are you going to relieve symptoms? And what are the goals that you have? The goal might just be to have more energy so you can exercise more. A digestive tract program may be able to help you achieve that goal. If the goal might be to get rid of depression or anxiety, a digestive tract program might be able to help. Okay? Some people are still saying it's muffled. Well, I don't know why. Let me just do it. Is the sound clear? Maybe sometimes it's on the other person's computer. I'm just going to keep going. I don't think I can do much anyways. I'm sorry, if it's muffled, maybe we'll try to get a cleaner copy of the recording. So when we're doing these corrections, okay, we're looking at 3 body systems: neuroendocrine, GI, and the detox. Should I try to move it away? Let's see. Some people are saying it's fine. I really don't know. And we want to correct all 3 of these systems, okay? So I want to show you the ways that this can be impacted. Like as a simple example, like brain adrenal GI connection, yeah, brain GI connection. So we can have something like cortisol, a stress component that's responding to inflammation. We could have inflammation that's being generated from gluten that's impacting the brain. You could have a yeast overgrowth in your gut. The byproducts of the yeast overgrowth can impact the brain. You can have a parasitic infection, and we'll look at some examples of that in a minute, like Giardia, that can impact the brain, right? So you can have, and here's the problem is that, you know, what we experience and what we feel, is generally how we relate to our problems. So what I mean by that is, what, you know, if we're feeling anxiety, we're assuming that that's what the problem is, and that we just need some anxiety relief. No one with anxiety is thinking that they have an H. pylori infection. With depression, everyone's assuming that the depression is related to something sort of deep and dark and whatever it may be that we think of, that depression comes from the psyche. People aren't really thinking that depression could be coming from a GI tract infection. So very often, if not most of the time, people are completely unaware that these infections are going on. Now, if you have IBS, Crohn's disease, reflux, then it's obvious that you're in pain and your gut is damaged, and it's a little easier to put these things together. But again, the majority of the time, it's not so obvious, and so people don't know. So I want to show you, we can skip this, that's on the agenda. So here's the actual GI map test. So the test is quite comprehensive. They check for a variety of different things. They look for different sorts of bacterial pathogens. They look for my favorite parasites, crypto, ehisto, and giardia. They look for viral pathogens as well. They look for H. pylori, very important. They do a check for normal flora, the potential autoimmune bacteria, more parasites down here, all the yeast markers, and then they have these additional markers here that look for SIG-A, that's the immune response in the gut, for gluten, or anti-gliadin is a test for gluten sensitivity, elastase, which looks for pancreatic enzyme function, and lactoferrin, which is an inflammatory marker. Okay, so those are the ones that we're looking at. And of course, there's a occult blood test on there in case there's some problem, like a cancer screening kind of thing. Or you may just have something like hemorrhoids if that shows up. But very comprehensive. Again, this is done from a PCR or a DNA test. PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction. They're looking for the DNA of these organisms. Okay, it's all done from a single stool sample. It's incredible technology if you think about it. It's incredible that you can tell from a hair who the person is, and you know the same exact concept has just been spread over to use with this kind of stuff in terms of finding infections. If you're interested in testing, you can call. I have phone appointments that we do. Be happy to help you get started. Just can email us at office@drkalish.com, or you can go to my website, kalishwellness.com. I have 2 patients in Dubai, so the answer is yes. We work with international people as well. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you a short break here, and we're just going to do, and this is a point to it, I think. Here we go. So this is this really amazing lasagna that I made, but the noodles are zucchini, isn't that cool? And that's basil and tomatoes. These tomatoes were like sugar, they're so good. We're just going to do like a 90-second or less commercial break here. We're just going to look at all my pictures from recently and see what I've been up to. Oh, there's San Francisco. We went on a hike, the girlfriend and I. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day. This is when I went to a Joe Satriani concert, and we were, there's a kid I was taking to the concert. There's all Joe's guitars, really great rocker. There's me talking. There's Frank, one of our students in the training program. This is a Lamborghini that I do not own. I will never own because it's too expensive, but it was really cool and I got to drive it. That's me in New York. I think New York is the best place in the world. That's my bicycle, and that's me leaving the farmer's market, and that is a bunch of vegetables. One thing I've learned is that if you have a head of lettuce, you should strap it on because it's really easy for it to pop out of these panniers and spill around. And that bike is what I transport myself on most of the time. I have several cars, and I like cars, but I usually bike. This is the Warriors game. Go Warriors. It was a great season. They almost made it all the way. There's one of our players taking a shot there. This is Oakland, where I live, which is a beautiful place. That's me in Washington. These are some really cool people at functional medicine conferences, all these wonderful doctors. There's my favorite doctor, Ben Lynch. If you don't know Ben, you should check out his stuff. Ben is really great. There's me driving the Lamborghini with the car guy. There's me driving a Bentley. I don't own a Bentley either. I was just test driving it for fun because we were having a fun day. There's some really beautiful flowers. There's my mom. Oh, here's my new car I just bought. This is my Alfa Romeo 1971. It's not really expensive, but it's really fun to drive. There's my mom. On Mother's Day, we went out for a hike. We found this flower. There's a Warriors winning it. There's my my brand new car that I just bought 2 months ago got hit by that monster truck, which was kind of funny, kind of sad. There's a picture of my house. There's my car in the repair shop trying to get it fixed. And there's a really good line. All right, so let's get back to the subject here. Okay, so research shows that people can only pay attention to a complex subject for anywhere from 12 to 14 minutes, and then your brain just spaces out. So now we're going to get back into it. All right, now you ready? Symptoms. Now let's think this through, because this is the most important point. Gas, bloating, acid reflux, constipation, diarrhea. Kind of obvious you should do this test, because it's either going to be food, generally, or some kind of overgrowth of a pathogen, bacteria, yeast, or parasite that's causing the problem. But as we've been mentioning, you could also have fatigue, weight gain, depression, low sex drive, feel toxic, or have some anxiety and trouble focusing. That could be coming from a pathogen in your gut. The vast majority of time, when we find these digestive tract infections, there's no digestive tract symptoms present whatsoever. So then who do we do GI testing on? Basically everybody. So in my practice, I test everybody. And it's easy if you test everybody, right? So testing necessary for everyone, especially if you've had these problems. Here's what the villi look like. So if you look at the intestinal tract, it's a pretty interesting structure. It's got, it's a tube, obviously, and it has these little finger-like projections sticking up. And you can see they have this little term here, the villi and then microvilli. And it has these intestinal crypts that go down. So our absorptive capacity, our ability to pull nutrients in from our food, is totally dependent on the ability of these villi and microvilli to function properly. They're kind of like a shag carpet, that things are getting stuck in. And when things get stuck in the shag carpet, those are the nutrients that you're pulling through. So if your body's inflamed and not working properly in the gut, you're not going to absorb well. And one of the characteristics or hallmarks of these particular kinds of infections is that they damage the gut lining, they trigger a lot of inflammation in the gut, and you don't absorb nutrients really well, even if you're eating a super clean diet. Okay, so there's 3 major things that can trigger this: emotional stress, inflammation coming from the gut, and toxin-related problems can also cause gut problems, and gut problems can cause toxin problems. And this is the big issue in functional medicine, is that everything can cause everything, and anything can cause anything. So a gut problem can cause a hormone imbalance, it often does. A gut problem can cause a brain imbalance, it often does. A gut problem can cause a toxicity issue, it often does, right? It's not this one-to-one. It's not like a gut problem always causes gut symptoms. The whole point of functional medicine is that we're throwing out that symptom-oriented. That's not how it works. When I had, you saw my 1971 Alpha. Before I had the Alpha years ago, I had a 1972 BMW 2002 because I really like these vintage sports cars. And so it was having this really weird problem. Every time it would rain, I would go out to my car, and there would be a puddle of water on the passenger seat side down the floorboards. It would just be soaked. And so the first thing you think is, oh, crap, I left the window open, Shouldn't have left the window open, it rained. So you roll the window up, and you're like, well, but it kept happening. And clearly, I was rolling the window up. I couldn't figure out why was this happening. And I was pretty sure that the car was leaking. And I was looking all over the car trying to find a leak, because I was assuming there's water in the base of the car, it must be leaking. And this went on for longer than it should have. I finally brought it into my mechanic, and he didn't even look at the car. I told him what was going on. This is why I love this mechanic so much. His name is Nat. And Nat just shook his head. He's like, you shouldn't even brought the car in. It's like, damn, just there's a plug in the front of the car on the outside, and it's clogged. And because that thing is clogged, all the water is draining into the car. He was right. I looked under the hood, and there's a bunch of dirt that had clogged up this one little thing. So if someone's really good at what they're doing, like Nat is for vintage BMWs, you can just hear what's happening to the person and know what's going on. And me rolling the windows up and down and trying to find where the roof of the leak was me being kind of like not understanding it. It's the same thing with functional medicine. If you understand what's going on with the gut, you can fix all these kind of problems just by knowing where the original issue is coming from. And It takes expert understanding to get this, but now you guys have it. I'm just telling you right now. If you, all you have to do is believe it, I'm saying it's true, and you'll be able to figure out a vast majority of all kinds of chronic health problems by doing the gut corrections. Now, the problem with the gut is that most of the testing that we order, and this has always been a problem with functional medicine, isn't that accurate. Now, you know, functional medicine doctors don't like to, you walk in the door, I'm not going to say, hey, you know, it's so great to see you, here's a $400 test kit, but it's not that accurate. You know, I mean, but that's basically what's happening behind the scenes. And that's why, what do we do to make up for that? Well, the stool kits that I use, there's 4 samples. Why do you think there's 4 samples? It's because it's hard to find these infections with the stool test. So the lab companies try to make up for this in a lot of different ways. You know, a simple, obvious way is to do multiple samples. So in the normal lab kits that I order, we have 4 samples. So we're 4 times more likely to find an infection. There's also special antigens that we use, and there's all kinds of different techniques the labs use to find it. Because the standard stool test is you know, a difficult way to find these bugs. Now, I'm so excited about this new testing technology because now, in addition to multiple samples, we also have the ability to look for the DNA of these bugs. And that's you know, kind of a game changer in a lot of different ways. Do I still do the standard stool testing? Absolutely yes. This is an additional, more sophisticated technology. It's just like if you hurt your arm really bad. This happened to me a couple of years back. I slipped, I fell. You know, it turned out I broke my arm. But you know, I went into the doctor's office. The first thing they did was take an X-ray. That made sense. You know, oh, it's broken. You know, and then eventually I went back, and there was more problems, and they eventually did an MRI. They did a more advanced test later on. They didn't do the MRI the first day. They went to the MRI when I went back to get more information. And so, same thing in functional medicine. You do a standard stool test often as a screening test. But if you want to get really sophisticated and up it, the MRI, you know, of stool testing is now this DNA PCR testing that we're looking at. Right? Why do testing? Basically, it should be for everybody. Let's not worry too much about that. We've already talked about that. So let's go through the 4 horsemen and see how each of these is related. So inflammation can be triggered by infections. We all know that just intuitively. Like you tear up your leg, you crash on your bike, you rip your leg, and it's all shredded and bloody, and it gets infected, it gets inflamed. Right? It's common sense. The GI tract tissue, when it's infected with parasites, bacteria, or yeast, gets inflamed. Now the thing is, if you scrape your knee really bad in a bike accident, you can see the tissue damage and inflammation. You can't see the gut lining. Now you would think, logically, that if your gut was that inflamed, because you had an infection on these nasty organisms, that you would feel it. Just have to trust me. This is just asking you to believe this is true. It's been my observation for all these years. I was taught this, and I've seen it now, and I think any functional medicine doctor would tell you the same thing, that the vast majority of these really nasty infections people don't feel in their gut. It's not where the problem manifests. The problem manifests somewhere else. And one of the main reasons how this process plays out is because of the chronic inflammation generated by the gut, can damage these other tissues. Again, when we have a gut infection, it throws us into what we call catabolic physiology. This means we start to break stuff down in a bad way. We break our own bodies down in a really bad way. And it's a side effect of the inflammation driving this one hormone called cortisol up. And when that happens, our blood sugar gets a little unstable, and we start to break down protein instead of utilizing protein properly. And that causes a whole host of problems. Muscle weakness, weight gain, stuff like that. When we're catabolic and we're stressed because of the infection, we're going to break down either muscle tissue to get fuel, or we're going to break down the gut lining. Okay? So again, you go back to catabolic. When we're stressed because of an infection, your body goes through this little process. I'll circle the thing here. You see what it says here? Cannibalization of muscle tissue. In other words, when we're infected and we become catabolic because cortisol is surging and going up, we start to break down amino acids for protein synthesis. Okay? And that's an emergency response. It really backfires on us in the long term because this breakdown of amino acids is going to break down muscle tissue, or we're going to get those amino acids that we need from the gut lining, in which case it leads to what we call leaky gut. So gut infection triggers the catabolic physiology, which makes the gut lining even weaker. It's a bad situation. Now, I have thought many times about filing complaints with the design team for the human body and writing letters. I've written so many letters in my head. Why did you design it like this? Why, when someone gets a gut infection, does their gut get weaker? And now I've come to this sort of mature conclusion in my 50s. I'm going to be turning 52 in a couple of days. That there is a divine plan here, right? Like the design team really knew what they were doing. The design is based on survival at all costs. And if your gut lining has to be sacrificed for you to survive a gut infection, so be it. You know, so there is nothing in nature. Everything in nature, I think, is designed perfectly. It's just a matter of our human brains trying to perceive that. If you have a gut infection for a long time, it's going to eventually trigger enough inflammation that you become insulin resistant. And then what happens? You put on body fat. It doesn't look very good. You get sweet cravings. You're always eating sugar. You can't stop it. It makes you feel bad about yourself because you just can't control your own appetite. So a chronic gut infection is going to lead to insulin resistance and prediabetes and maybe even diabetes if you're sick enough. Now, most of the time, and again, this is sort of another example of how things happen in steps, right? One thing leads to another, but not in a good way. So if you have a gut infection and you become insulin resistant, you're going to lean towards foods that are not so healthy for you. Because when you're insulin resistant, you're going to want more refined flour and more sugar. Eating those kinds of foods is going to make you even more inflamed and even more insulin resistant. So again, there's this sort of problem leading to another problem leading to another problem. It's this sort of downward spiral of problems that's occurring. The main solution to this is to eat as much as you can in a way that's anti-inflammatory. And that's a fancy, complicated way of saying you should eat vegetables with every meal. It's not, you know, mysterious. Spices are also really anti-inflammatory and good quality fats. Again, one thing leading to another, right? You become insulin resistant. You're sort of drawn towards or pushed towards or pulled towards unhealthy foods. You start to gain weight, and then that excess body fat is in and of itself an inflammatory trigger. Again, you could write another letter to the design team complaining about this, but basically when we put on body fat, we get more and more and more inflamed, and eventually it's this downward spiral. And one of the most important aspects to gut infections, and this is one that I'm kind of late to the party at understanding, to be honest with you, is oxidative stress. I want to show you a little bit about what that means here. So oxidative stress is a tricky one. I'm going to pull up some other slides. Oxidative stress is so important. You know, I'll tell you, I was at this seminar. I don't know, it's a couple of years ago now. I don't know how the time goes so quickly. Oh, wait a minute, it's time for another commercial break. Hang on, it's been more than 12, 14 minutes. Okay, I'm going to tell you this little story here. I hope you guys haven't heard my story already, but this is a great story. So this is the Mariposa lily. It only grows on one mountainside in the whole world, which is in Marin County, California. It's called like Ring Mountain or something like that. And it only blooms at one time a year for a couple weeks. And so on Mother's Day, my mom and my sister, who was also a mother, my mom obviously had 3 kids, my sister has 2 girls, they decided, it was kind of their choice because it was Mother's Day, right? We're getting this family gathering, that they wanted to go find the mystical Mariposa lily. And so we all went out to this mountain in Marin County, did this big trip, and we're hiking around the mountain trying to find the Mariposa lily. And my sister is a science teacher. She's a biologist by training. And my mom is, you know, lifelong person who loves plants. So they really wanted to find this Mariposa lily. And neither of them had ever seen one before. They just heard about it. So we're walking around, and this just went on for hours, you know. Because it's a big mountain, and how are you going to find this one little flower in the middle of this huge mountain? And finally, we meet this other group that's found the Mariposa lily, and they kind of tell us where it is, and so we go off in this other direction trying to find the thing. This is going on all day. And eventually, I just get frustrated and bored, and I'm like, I don't really care about this flower. In the first place, I'm just out here because it's Mother's Day. So I'm like, hey, guys, I'm going to just wander over here. I just saw this view, and I wanted to walk over and check out the view. And so I leave the main group, I walk around this corner, and I just felt like walking, and boom, I walked right into the Mariposa lily. How funny is that? And I started screaming and waving my hands, and everyone came over, and It just showed me, though, the power of intuition. I was like, I don't know where this flower is. I'm giving up. I'm just going to walk over here and do something else. And I literally walked right into the flower. It was pretty funny. All right, so back to regularly scheduled programming. Oxidative stress. This is really important. So when you cut an apple in half and it starts to turn brown, that's an example of oxidation. Many other examples. A nail getting rusty is an example of oxidation. So when things get oxidized, it's not a good thing. Here you go. Here's what I was looking for. And so when things get oxidized, basically, what it means is that the mitochondria, which is represented here, which is the engine of the cell, it's where you make all the energy for your body. So the energy in your body does everything, right? It fuels your brain. The energy in your body fuels your liver. The energy in your body is why you can stand up and walk around, why you can talk. ATP, or energy, is pretty critical. The areas of the body that use a lot of energy, of course, the brain does. The heart uses not quite as much as you might think. Skeletal muscle uses tons of energy. The liver uses a lot of energy. I think about 20% of your body's energy is used by your brain. Somewhere around 20% is used by your liver, and somewhere around like 22% is used by your skeletal muscle. So really important to have a lot of energy. When we're getting a lot of oxidative stress, the mitochondria are damaged, and they become full of what are called free radicals. And this is not a good thing. I'm going to show you a bigger picture of that. This one's a little more blown up. I think it'll be easier to visualize. So when you get a lot of oxidative stress, what happens? The oxidation can damage DNA and lead to DNA adducts, which can eventually lead to cancers, various forms of tumors. If there's a lot of oxidative stress to your blood vessels, that can lead to development of plaquing and basically a heart attack, or problems with the arteries not being able to pump blood to the heart effectively. A lot of oxidative stress can cause insulin resistance. Talked about that earlier, which can lead to prediabetes and diabetes. So oxidative stress is kind of like the beginning of all bad things. It leads to all the chronic degenerative diseases. Again, here's your healthy mitochondria making an abundant amount of ATP to fuel your liver, your brain, your muscles. The damaged mitochondria over here, free radical damage has increased, the ATP supply is low. So now you're tired, overweight, toxic, because you can't detox effectively. You can't run your brain effectively. You're not feeling very good. Oxidative stress is one of the main results of chronic digestive tract infections, because the infection is generating all this tissue damage and oxidative stress. So this is another tie-in, right? When you realize that, it's like, wow, is that even possible? Why don't I just take a ton of antioxidants to prevent this problem? Well, what if there's a digestive tract infection that's generating your oxidative stress? And that's one of the triggers for your cardiovascular disease, your blood sugar instabilities, your fatigue, whatever it may be. So oxidative stress that comes from the gut is huge and important. I mean, people generally can't feel that this is happening. You don't wake up in the morning and say, wow, I think I have some oxidative stress that happened to me last night because I ate an unhealthy meal and I have a yeast overgrowth, right? People just are not aware that this is happening. For digestive tract infections, one of their hallmarks is oxidative stress. There we go. So we talked a little bit about this here too. H. pylori, this is one example of an infection, but it's a common one. H. pylori can cause all kinds of problems in the stomach, leading to oxidative stress. So let's go back to where we started here, when we're thinking about underlying causes, physiological damage, the body systems, and then leading over to symptoms. So where we exist, I'm like this as well, is in this world of symptoms, where I can't believe I just put on 5 pounds. I'm kind of tired. I don't feel that great today. I'm a little depressed or a little anxious. Symptoms that can tie back to a whole variety of underlying causes. If we're talking about the underlying cause of GI infections, that can trigger any of the symptoms on this list. It can trigger, and we talked a little bit about this, right? So how could a GI infection trigger insomnia? Well, it's going to cause you to be inflamed. It's going to drive your cortisol out of balance. Cortisol helps regulate our sleep cycles. How could a GI infection cause sugar cravings? Well, remember, it causes insulin resistance, that your blood sugar bouncing up and down. It's not so great. How could a GI infection cause depression? Well, if your gut is inflamed, that can directly inflame the brain. The neurotransmitters then become depleted. People get depressed. How can a GI infection cause weight gain? Chronic inflammation and insulin resistance is like a recipe for gaining weight. So again, hardest concept to understand, even for me, and I've been doing this for like 30 years, the hardest concept to understand is that symptoms bear little or sometimes no relationship to the underlying cause. And this is the most obvious and the most problematic when it comes to GI infections. Now, you know, when I first started doing this, let me just take a step back. 10 years ago, last week, my teacher, Dr. Timmons, died. And he taught me all of this stuff. You know, he was such a patient man. Oh my gosh, and I was such a pain in the ass student. It's like, when you're so young, you know, your late 20s, early 30s, you don't really, I don't know, you don't really appreciate people so much, do you? You know, you're just so full of yourself. But, you know, he trained me in all this stuff, and I swear, half the time when he was training me, I was just thinking, this is a nice old man here, but he's got to be off his rocker. There's no way that all my patients have a digestive tract infection and I don't know about it. You know, that's kind of arrogant. But now that I've done so many tens of thousands of these labs, I can just tell you, it's a really big problem. Probably half of the people listening to this talk have a GI infection. If you haven't been tested yet, might have no idea. Absolutely have no idea about it. So remember, with the test we're looking at tonight, GI map is a PCR or DNA test. And I just want to give you a little, you know, little detail-y, sciencey stuff. Some of you like this, I know, some of you don't, but just bear with me if you don't like this stuff. I'll go fast. Bacterial pathogens are checked for. It's all from one single stool sample. They look for parasites, not every parasite. So this leads into the one important criticism for this test, is that when you have a lab and you send in a stool sample, a standard what they call O and P, which stands for ova and parasite, the lab technician who's looking at that sample can see what's in the sample and then write it down. So they're not limited in any way other than by what they see. When you do this GI map test, they have to pre-select what they're looking for because they amplify the DNA of these various organisms, and unless they're looking for the organism, they're not going to find it. So the GI map is not looking for worms, and if it's a really obscure a parasite that no one's ever heard of, it's not going to show up on this test because they're pre-selecting what they're looking for. So again, there is one advantage to the old-style type of stool testing, which is that a lab tech can see an infection that may not be something that we're pre-selecting to look for. The advantage to the PCR or DNA testing is that finding the shred of a piece of DNA of an organism is a lot easier to a certain extent than finding the whole organism under a microscope. So there's pros and cons. This is not like a cure-all for everything in the world, but it's a really important technological breakthrough. If you think about it, it's like a, I don't know, what's a good example? I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's like an iPhone, you know, that it's amazing technology, and yet if it was an emergency right now and, you know, all the cell phone towers were down, you would want to have a landline, yeah? So like the stool testing, old school OMP is like the landline, you know, solid, reliable, you know it's going to work. It's this, you know, kind of technology that we've had forever. And this is a newer, excuse me, a newer cutting edge technology that that is, you know, just being fully exploited right now. So they look for crypto, ehisto, and giardia. Ehisto in particular is very difficult to find on any kind of stool sample. Almost impossible. So this one's extra important, ehisto. And that's the one that I picked up when I lived in Thailand. So in my early 20s, I decided that it would be a good idea to ordain as a monk. And so I went to Thailand and checked myself into a monastery. And I ended up picking up a pretty nasty parasite there, which was called ehisto. Took me a long time to get rid of it. I finally did. And I'll show you a picture of it in a minute here if I can. But H. pylori, so not only looks for H. pylori, but also these virulence factors. Normal bacteria. They check for opportunistic bacteria, Citrobacter, Klebsiella, protease, and these are what they call potential autoimmune triggers. So it's not definitive. Autoimmune diseases are not caused specifically by those bugs, but it's a potential. And there's certainly risk, or your risk for, maybe the best way to put it is your risk for autoimmune illnesses go up if you see those that are present. And then it checks for these parasites that are not usually considered issues in conventional medicine, but functional medicine doctors are very interested in finding them. Blastocystis hominis, Dientamoeba fragilis, Endolimex nana, Entamoeba coli, Chilomastix, Cyclospora, and Pentatrichomona something. Pentatricha, I can't pronounce that one. I'm not even try that one, the bottom one there. That one doesn't show up very often. I can't even pronounce it. Yeast overgrowth, really important. Candida, Geotrichum, Microsporidia. These are yeast or fungal organisms that can overgrow the gut. Standard stool testing sometimes finds them, but standard stool testing is a problem is that a lot of times the levels of detectable yeast are gone by the time the stool sample reaches the lab. So a very helpful test for that particular kind of bug. And again, this isn't the only test in the world. It's just a new technology that you should know about. And whenever technologies are new, you know, they're, I don't know, I mean, there's difficulties with them, right? There's, how can I say it? There's, it's hard for us to accept new technologies. And so what I usually find in my industry is that it takes 5 or 10 years until a new technology is widely adopted. And, you know, I don't know if you're suffering now, why wait? This is why I'm doing this talk, so you can get tested now and not have to wait until everyone in the world knows about this. Now, it's not new in the sense that it's flaky, because remember I mentioned these are third-party validated tests. So laboratories throughout the world have been doing PCR testing, and there is sort of this worldwide agreement on what a positive test means. So when you see a positive on this particular lab company's workup, you know that it's a valid test. So to that extent, it's not brand new. It's just a new application of a technology that's been around for a little while. So secretory IgA is a marker for the immune response in the gut lining. Antigliadin is a marker for gluten sensitivity. I mentioned earlier elastase for pancreatic enzyme problems. Lactoferrin is an inflammatory marker. And then occult blood is the blood. So this particular lab, you can see, these are all from my patients. This patient had a candida overgrowth, moderate, and blastocystis hominis, positive. Very important to know. Let's just look at 1 or 2 more of these so you can see what they look like. This is a good one. My assistant pulled these. I didn't see these earlier. This is another patient of mine, C. difficile. Look at that. That's a good one. That's a bacteria that overgrows in the intestinal tract. And the 2, remember, these are potential autoimmune triggers. This doesn't mean you have an autoimmune illness, but there is literature to show Citrobacter and Klebsiella can be a contributing factor in autoimmune illness. In any case, you want to get rid of them. Look at this one. These are real patients. These aren't like made-up fake tests from the, some weird place. These are my patients. Dientamoeba fragilis, Endolimex nana, Candida overgrowth. All right, let's add all these up. Candida, Endolimex nana, Dientamoeba fragilis. That's 3 infections there. 2 of these autoimmune bacteria, ouch, potential autoimmune bacteria. And C. diff, that's 1 person. That's like 5 infections, right? C. diff, so many I'm losing count. Citrobacter Klebsiella, that's 3. Dientamoeba fragilis, Endolimex nana, and yeast, that's 6. 6 different overgrowths in this person's gut. That is not a healthy gut. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but it's true. You could have that many infections and have no GI symptoms. Your symptom could be depression and anxiety with a lab that looks just like this. I think we got 1 more in here. That was a dramatic one. But these are real people. This is not me making stuff up. This is like real people that are coming to see me that are suffering. This one has a couple of viral pathogens. Those are usually self-limiting. It means they go away. Endolimex, Nana, and yeast overgrowth and Bacchus. And one of the, and a Candida overgrowth as well. Okay. And I have hundreds of these. We can show you a lot of them. But you get the idea. Sometimes they come back normal. Oftentimes there's a pretty big problem. If you're interested in testing, you can get a hold of my office. We work with patients all over the world. I'm going to answer a couple of questions here because there's a bunch of good ones that come in. And then everything is recorded tonight, so you're welcome to listen in before, later on, or send a copy of the recording to a friend. And let's see. And if you registered for this, you'll automatically get a copy of the recording email too, okay? Don't have to worry about that. So let's just look at one or two more things because we've got an extra minute here to wrap things up. And I got here, let me show you. I want to just show you how this plays out like in a real person. So, and one of the things that I learned from Dr. Timmons is that, and I've copied this now in my own practice. None of this is original, you guys. I didn't make any of this up. All I did was listen carefully. I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. When I was just out of school, I moved down to San Diego, and I got a job working with this naturopath. And it was just like everyone around me was just so into functional medicine. It was like Haight Ashbury for rock and roll in 1969. Or, it was just like the golden era. There was lab directors, there was doctors, there's PhDs, there's nutritionists, all around that part of California. And supplement companies starting up. It was really just this amazing, time for functional medicine. And I was 29, 30 years old, and I just hung out with really smart people and just listened to every word they said, and just absorbed it all. So the hardest concept to understand is that someone can come in with 5 or 6 GI tract infections. Maybe they have a genetic problem, maybe they don't. Maybe they're not getting enough sleep and they're over-exercising. There's multifactorial. It's always more than one thing, right? We're just talking about GI infections now. And then those things, those underlying causes, accumulate and generate physiological damage. 4 types of physiological damage, the 4 horsemen: inflammation, bad; catabolic physiology, bad. That means you're breaking things down. You're breaking down your gut lining. You're breaking down your muscle tissue. Insulin resistance, very bad. And then oxidative stress. All 4 of these things put us at much greater, well, they don't put us at risk for. These 4 things are what cause chronic degenerative illnesses. This is what they're caused by, the physiological damage. Okay, eventually body systems get involved, but remember, you might have a GI symptom and a problem with GI tract, but you might just as easily have a problem with your neuroendocrine system, your hormones, or your brain. So by the time you get to the symptoms, you could have weight gain, fatigue, depression, or anxiety as a direct result of these GI infections. Or you might have some GI problems. I had Entamoeba histolytica, one of the worst parasites known of all these different infections. And for most of the time that I had E. histo, I had no digestive symptoms whatsoever. I had allergies, I had chronic fatigue, but I had no digestive symptoms. So I'm an example of this as well. You could have a sex hormone imbalance because of a gut problem. You could have a brain imbalance because of a gut problem. You could be eating all the wrong foods because of a gut infection. So again, when we're getting on to the cure side, how we fix these things, how do we fix these things? We clean up the diet. We work with testing and finding out what the infections are. And where one of the biggest breakdowns in functional medicine for my entire career is on the accuracy and reliability of the stool testing. Do I still do the standard stool testing? Absolutely yes. But now we have this new technology that we can add to it, which greatly enhances our ability. I'm sure it's just like this when the orthopedic surgeons first got MRIs. Did they stop doing x-rays? No, they still do x-rays all the time. But the enhanced technology is really nice because it gives you a different look and a deeper look at all this different information. All right? So pretty excited about this work. Again, it's called the GI map test. You want to learn more about it, you just Google GI map and it should pop right up. If you want to find a practitioner who does it, you can work with me directly. If you don't want to work with me, you want to find someone local, you can also look at the Kalish Institute's website, and you'll see a list of practitioners that know how to do this stuff. The nice thing about our practitioner directory is that those are all people that are working with me all the time. I know the lab director, and I talk to him every day, or not every day, but every week or two. So you know you're in good hands if you find one of the people that we've trained. And you can go to the Kalish Institute here and click around on the practitioner directory part, and you can find that information. And if you're a doctor yourself and you're listening to this, you're welcome to email me if you have specific questions. I'll be happy to answer them. And for patients, you can hunt around on the directory here, or you can call my clinic. Okay, I hope that helped. I'm going to wrap it up. It's been an hour. Have a great rest of your month. And I'm excited that you guys are all listening to this series. Has been widely well received. I'm going to keep doing these, and we'll keep getting people signed up. Okay, there's one quiz question for those online. Whoever gets this right, I will just be so impressed. What is the name of this vegetable that we're looking at right now? What is it? Anyone type it into the little box, and then I'll be just like massively impressed. Anybody know? Fennel? Good guess, but no. Yes, asparagus. That's asparagus. Can you believe it? Here's what it looks like when it's in the ground. Who would have thought asparagus grows in the ground? Okay, now one of you guys got that right. So I want to give you a harder one now. There's my cousin Scotty and my girlfriend. We were in Hawaii. Isn't Scotty great? He's a character. Anyways, we were staying at this organic farm a couple weeks ago. Let me find. All right, wait a minute. All right, here's one. All right, who knows what that is? If anyone gets this, I'll be even more impressed. The asparagus, I was pretty blown away by. Who knows what this is? This is a really hard one. Anybody? Just guess. Guess what that is. It's okra. Someone got it right. I can't believe that. Who got it right? Someone with Jen in their first name. Yeah, very impressive. Someone got the okra. There it is. That's the same plant. Isn't that cool? Who would have thought? Okra, that's an okra flower. That's like a little flower on its way to becoming an okra. There's my great-great-grandparents' grave. Anyways, we had a lot of fun in Hawaii. Okay, have a great rest of your week, everyone. We'll catch up soon. All right, bye for now.